Hello dear tea friends from around the world. Welcome to our first class about Lu Yu and his charging the classic of tea. Today we are simply going to make an introduction about Lu Yu, about the context in which this author wrote this book, who he is, when he lived, and I hope that you will be interested in learning more about it. And this will be a monthly class that I will conduct same time live on Facebook at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, US, and later you can see it on replay on my YouTube channel. And you can give me a thumbs up if you like this kind of tea classes, and you can subscribe to my channel if you want more. And if you want to drink some greater teas from my selection, you can also go to tea-masters.com. This is my e-boutique on the web. So let's start, and today, sorry, I'm going to read a lot because there is so much information, so much detail about Lu Yu's life. It cannot go everything in my head. So let's start with, of course, when he was born in the year 733, and he died in 804. Of our time. This means that Lu Yu lived during the Tang Dynasty, one of China's most glorious eras. This Tang Dynasty, it lasted from 618 to 907, and it succeeded the much shorter Sui Dynasty, which lasted roughly almost 40 years, 581 to 618. And this Sui dynasty is what put an end to the division of China between rival kingdoms. It was also before the Three Kingdoms and then many other kingdoms. So this kind of history looks almost like a repeat of what happened with the Han Dynasty and the Qin Dynasty. If you remember, I did one class also on this channel about this book, Qin and Han Dynasty, which lasted from 221 before Christ until 220 after. Very interesting to see that Chinese history is like a cycle. Very often very similar events happen, and it looks like there's always a time of division, a time of war between different kingdoms, and then comes a strong founder who is able to bring unity to China again. Then it goes through a time of ascendance, and it reaches its climax at the Golden Age, and then comes a slow decline until the empire breaks up in different kingdoms, and there is war again, division, and then it repeats again. So with the Tang Dynasty, China was able to find its unity again after 4 centuries of division, and therefore this is really looked at as really a great time for China. And if we look elsewhere, what happened at the time of Lu Yu? Actually, just 1 year before Lu Yu was born, in the year 732, Charles Martel, he stopped the invasion of Islam in Europe, in Poitiers. And then a bit later on during Lu Yu's life, we had Karl the Great, also called Charlemagne, who did try first reunification of his Frankish and Germanic kingdom on the basis of like the Roman Empire, which had broken down, but later, very quickly, so he was able to achieve this between 768 and 814, but after that, again, it broke down in division, and then Europe was marred into the Middle Ages until roughly 1492, so here we are still in the year 700 something. So for 700 years, or 700 years before Europe came out of its Middle Age, China was experiencing really a great time with this Tang dynasty. However, this golden age was nevertheless a bit fragile. The Tang dynasty also experienced the An Lushan rebellion from 755 to 763. So this was when Lu Yu was between the ages of 22 and 30. This rebellion was orchestrated by An Lushan, who was a barbarian general. And by this I mean that he was not born Chinese. And in this book, that is a bit the base of my study of Lu Yu Classique du Thé, it's at the Édition Les Belles Lettres in French, so I'm basing my today's class on the introduction. The author and the translator describes this An Lushan as a Turk. This is one of the few detailed where I have a critique to make to this book. I would not describe him as really as a Turk, because Turk nowadays brings us back to the country Turkey, which is not where An Lushan is actually from. He's born from two parents from two tribes. One is from Sogdian, which is in East Iran, and the other parent is half Gokturk. So he's actually much more from the Central Asia, the steppes of Central Asia, with some Persian, maybe Proto-Turk background. But really, what is important to remember is that he's not Chinese. But this is actually quite normal, and quite it happened a lot that the Chinese army was made of many mercenaries, many tribes that were living around China, and that helped the Chinese emperor to defend the border, thanks against money, of course. And An Lushan was a very successful general in the Chinese army. He was able to go high in the ranks so quickly that he even became almost the adoptive son of the emperor's concubine, Yang Guifei, a very famous one. And but this was never enough for him, and at one point he wanted the power for himself. He wanted to start his own dynasty, and that's where he created this rebellion. And one of the military, Chinese military who opposed him and remained loyal to the emperor was Yan Zhenqing. And so he was one of the top resistance fighter against the An Lushan rebellion. We are going to talk about him a little bit more later on. So the Tang dynasty managed to find enough resources to put an end to this rebellion, and which could have been fatal to it. Maybe this is also a mark of a great era, where you are continuously at the edge between magnificent time but also a very dangerous time, and you are able to overcome the challenges of your time. What other things make a golden age? A golden age is also marked by great men, and during Lu Yu's life he was contemporary to the two greatest Chinese poets, Li Bai, who is probably the most well-known in the West, but also Du Fu, who I've been reading also in this collection from the Édition Les Belles Lettres in French and Chinese. He's really wonderful writer, full of wit, and full of imagination also. So Du Fu and Li Bai were contemporary to Lu Yu, and also this Yan Zhenqing, this military general who was loyal to the Emperor Xuanzong, and but he is not known so much for his military prowess than for his calligraphy. Yan Zhenqing, his style is still taught today in China and in Taiwan because it's one of the best and most beautiful calligraphy styles that there is. Before we turn to Louis' life, I wanted to make also a couple of more remarks. Why was it a golden age? One of the marks of why we came in the West out of the Middle Ages is because Gutenberg invented the press, which led to the printing of lots of books, and we were able to spread a lot of knowledge. But the Chinese in Tang Dynasty, they already invented the wood block printing, and therefore books started to be printed in the Tang Dynasty, which led to this spread of information. And of course, they had already a very good scholar system to select top people with very good skills in calligraphy and very well schooled. So, and another thing that is important to us is about geography. I want also to make sure that you understand that the China of the Tang Dynasty is not the China of today, and with two very big exceptions that make a difference. One is that the province of Yunnan was only conquered and annexed by the Yuan dynasty in the year 1276, so 500 years later after Louis, and also Taiwan was not part of China at that time during the Tang Dynasty. There had been already some expeditions, but it was definitely not a Chinese territory at the time of Tang. Therefore, the teas that Louis was drinking and that he describes in his book don't contain any tea from Yunnan or from Taiwan. Just to make this detail very clear. So now let's turn to Louis' life. Louis was born an orphan or an abandoned child in 733 in Jingling, west of Wuhan, in the Hubei province in central China. A monk named Zheji, whose surname could be Lu, raised him in a Buddhist monastery. But according to the new history of Tang, when he reached adulthood, it's Louis himself who made a divination using the Book of Changes, the I Ching, and he came with Bagua to the character Jian. When he researched this character in the book, he read the following sentence: the cranes, one after the other, land on the ground with their wings, they perform a dance. And in Chinese, the cranes are Hong. The one after another means Jian, and this character that he got from his divination. Then on the ground is Lu, and with the wings Yu, and therefore he took his name Lu as his family name, then Yu for the wings as his surname, and Hongjian, the cranes and the progression, as his customary name. Sorry. So sometimes he's called Lu Yu or Lu Hongjian. These two names, it's not completely sure where he got them. So one story says from the monk who adopted him, and another story says that he chose them himself thanks to the I Ching. Louis left the monastery when he was growing up, quite early, maybe 12, 13 years old, because he did not really like the very strict life of the monastery, where you have to get up very early, where you have to learn a lot of things. And in 746 he was a strolling player in a theater troupe, and so not a very good position, but the governor of Jingling, he noticed him and put him under his wing, and he therefore became his patron, and his financial means then were better assured. He later found several different other patrons where he would either entertain them. Actually, apparently he has also written a book about funny stories. He was very good at telling jokes, but unfortunately we don't have this book. It did not survive history. And sometimes he was also working as a tutor to the children of the patrons that were employing him. So when the Anlushan rebellion broke out, Lu Yu, he fled to Wuxing in Zhejiang and became friends with the monk Jiaozhan, who was 3 years older than him. From there, he would travel to Nanjing and explore the tea plantations near the Qixia monastery near the lake Tai. Lu Yu lived more or less like a hermit in a thatched cottage on the banks of the Tiaoxi, the river of reed flowers, near Wuxing. His many trips to Jiangsu and Zhejiang kept him away from the fighting during the Anlushan rebellion. And it's at this time that he began to write the Charjing, and he often visited his friend Jiaozhan, the monk. Now, so he must have had a nice life, able to escape the fighting. He was actually in an age 22 to 30 where he could have been drafted as a soldier, so it was very dangerous for him, so he had to hide, and he would often go from one province to another in order to be as far as possible from the fighting. And apparently he managed to do so, and during this time he studied a lot about tea, and we have some accounts of his time of studying from friends who wrote poems about him. So this also shows the kind of level of what kind of friends he would have, friends who did not just leave a letter or account in a journal about their friendship with him, but they would leave even poems. So let me read a few poems about Lu Yu's life. One is from Huang Furan in the year 758, and it's titled For Lu Hongjian, Picking Tea at Qixia Monastery. Tea is not picked like any other plant. He goes far and wide, climbing steep slopes. He spreads its leaves in the gentle spring wind and fills his basket in the waning sun. Familiar with the paths of the mountain monasteries, sometimes he spends the night with peasants. May I ask this noble care-free grass, when then will I see the foam in the bowl again? Speaking of bowl, I'm a bit thirsty, so let me take a sip of my Biluchun. Delicious. Yeah. And so quenching. Great. His friend Jiaozhan, a monk, also wrote a poem about tea. This is just an excerpt about a tea poem, which will echo one that you probably have heard before. A man from Yue offered me tea from the Shen Valley, whose golden buds are cooking in the metal cauldron. In the snow-white stoneware bowl, the scent of its water-green foam exhales. more fragrant than the immortal drink of jade buds. The first sip dispels all torpor. My well-being extends to the whole universe. The second sip purifies my soul, like rain cleansing fine dust. The third sip awakens me. No need to strive to break passions. The idea of each sip bringing a new sensation is not a new one, and it has been taken several times in other poems also, but this one is really quite nice, with this communion with the whole universe, and then the cleansing of the soul, and then the feeling of satisfaction. Listen to the third poem from Huang Fuzheng. To Lu Yu, tea picking at Mount Hui. The thousand mountains welcome the stroller, where fragrant tea grows in abundance. He knows the valleys where to pluck it. Alone in the mist, he loves to walk. In this time of retreat, far from the temple, he makes a frugal meal by the cool spring. All is silence. He lights up a lamp in the night. Sadly, he sings of the song of the sounding stones. Here, the sounding stones is a reference to the war, to the rebellion that was going on during this time, from another book. Otherwise, stones usually don't make any sound, but so this has this sad reference. So around the year 766, Lu Yu traveled to Mount Jun in the Changzhou region to taste the tea from there. He found it so refined that he inspired the governor to send the tea as a tribute, as a gift, to the emperor. And it was so successful that from then on, the Tea Tribute Bureau was set up, and 10,000 ounces of this tea were sent to the court every year. So also thanks to, maybe thanks to Lu Yu, that tea got even more popular in the court, and he must have been appreciated to have found one of the best teas from that time and have it sent to the emperor. This is the kind of nice attention, nice gift you can do. You can do to your ruler, and that will probably help you make get some good advantages. In the year 773, Lu Yu returned to Wuxing and befriended Yan Zhenqing. I remember this famous fighter, resistance general, and also calligrapher. A pavilion of the three Gui, the three scholars, was built to celebrate the trio they formed with monk Jiaozhan. His two friends will also build a house for Lu Yu at that time. It was located a little bit outside town, along a small river and surrounded by fields of mulberry, bamboo and tea trees. And it had a magnificent view of the mountains in the distance. So imagine this was really paradise for Lu Yu to have a house near a town where it's convenient to get things you need for your daily life, but also next to a river where you can get fresh water to make your tea, and you even have tea plants around your house, and a magnificent view in terms of feng shui, and this is really the best one could hope for. You have everything you need. So Lu Yu started to write the Chajing in the year 760 during the rebellion, but continued to add to it until the first edition came out in the year 780. So for almost 20 years he wrote this book, added more information to it. So it was started during the rebellion, but was completed much later. And thanks to the printing and also to the content of the book, the success came very rapidly, and he became famous already thanks to his book, especially during his lifetime. And we are going to see then in the coming months why this book is of such an excellent quality. So we will see each other again in 1 month to read and to better understand the first chapter of this book. For next week I will start to make some review of some of the spring high mountain oolongs from Alishan, because we are still in a nice, pleasant, warm end of summer season, and it's only a bit later on that we are going to move to the roasted Tieguanin sampler that I have prepared. So this one we will start once it will start to be a little bit cooler. There is still this promotion about Fushoshan. If you buy some Fushoshan tea from my store, you get also a small sample from the official Fushoshan farm that is very interesting to study and compare with the one that I selected. And yeah, that's about it. So please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please leave a comment and your question under this post, and subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my tea classes. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next week for this time a review of an high mountain oolong tea. Bye bye.